Hi, everyone. I'm Erica DeBrini-Sugars, the Director of Programs at the Austin Film Society. And we love to welcome you to our conversation, Shifting Perspectives About the Border, which is presented by the Austin Film Society, along with our partners, Femme Frontera. This panel is part of the 2021 Sundance Beyond Film program, and we're so excited to have you join us all here. If you would like to turn on closed captions, you'll find them at the bottom of your screen, labeled CC Live Transcript. And also, if you want to use your chat function, please do. You can chat with each other. But if during the conversation, we will have Q&A. And so you see also at the bottom a Q&A button, and that's where you can load your questions. The Austin Film Society works every day to make Austin a center for independent film, and that means supporting independent filmmakers from Texas's diverse communities with grants and support services, even during this pandemic, which we know has been hard on filmmakers' livelihoods. It means running a community media program and a production facility, and of course, keeping film culture in Austin thriving by bringing great films and filmmakers to our community, like the ones that we'll be talking to today. Since the AFS cinema is temporarily closed due to COVID-19, one of the ways we've been ensuring ongoing access to great film is through our virtual cinema program, AFS at Home. And you can find all of our virtual screenings online at austinfilm.org. But first, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Angie Reza Tures, for today's panel. Angie has worked in independent film since 2003 after graduating from the University of San Francisco. For 12 years, she worked as a producer, director, and editor in the Bay Area, mentoring under Oscar-nominated and Sundance Film Festival award-winning documentary filmmakers. Since 2011, Angie has lived and worked in El Paso, Texas, serving as the co-founder, executive director of Femme Frontera, our partner today. And it's a film organization which advocates for the amplifications of films made by female identifying filmmakers from border regions around the world, most especially the US-Mexican border. The Femme Frontera Filmmakers Showcase began as a celebration of films made by women filmmakers from the US-Mexico border region. Since then, they've expanded to include powerful short films from around the world whose stories challenge perceptions about women, border communities, immigrants, people of color, and the LGBTQ community. Femme Frontera has been featured in Variety, Texas Monthly, and Remezcla, and in 2019 became listed as one of the top 10 film festivals for female filmmakers, as well as one of the top film festivals who are showing how media has the power to change the world. In 2020, Femme Frontera was awarded a grant from the Ford Foundation, and in 2021, Angie will complete her first feature narrative script and begin work on a feature documentary about seeking environmental justice in her hometown. So I will pass it to you, Angie, and then we'll talk for a moment with our wonderful filmmakers who will be introduced shortly, and then we'll be back for questions. So take it away, Angie.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much to Sundance and to the Austin Film Society for inviting me to moderate this panel. It is quite the honor, and I'm very excited to be here. I'm also excited to get to speak with these amazing filmmakers on this panel. So thank all of you for agreeing to be on it and speaking with us today. First, I wanted to mention that I am on the land of the Mansos and Mescalero Apache. I live in El Paso, Texas, and I have brown hair that goes down into blonde, goes down and gets blonder as you go down. It's long, and I have a dark gray shirt and brown skin. I am very, again, excited to be here and to introduce you to all of our filmmakers. So I'm going to do that now. I need to pull it up here. Excuse me for a sec. Okay, so I'd first like to start by introducing Aitch Alberto. Writer-director Aitch Alberto is a Sundance Episodic Lab Fellow, recipient of Skowhegan Artist Residency, a Yaddo Fellowship, a Latino Screenwriting Project Fellowship, and an alumnus of the AFS Screenwriting Lab. Aitch was also included in the Blacklist inaugural Latinx list, as well as the Tracking Board's 2019 hit list and Young and Hungry list, and Nalip's list of Latinx directors you should know. She also adapted the novels Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe and Gracefully Grayson for the screen. They also serve as a writer on Apple TV's critically acclaimed Little America from Ellen Yang, Kumail Nanjiani, and Emily V. Gordon. Next, I would like to introduce you to Robie Flores. And Robie Flores grew up on the US-Mexico border. She's an independent filmmaker and activist based in Eagle Pass, Texas, and New Orleans. Her work has appeared on CNN and Bloomberg and has been featured by Teen Vogue, Fusion, Allure, and ID Vice. She's drawn to telling stories that explore the nuances of her fronterizo, Chicano, and Mexican American communities. Her latest project, The In-Between, has received support from Chicken and Eggs Diversity Fellows Initiative, Just Films, Ford Foundation, Field Division, Sundance, Austin Film Society, ITVS, and was selected for IFP's 2018 Documentary Lab, the 2018 Points North Fellowship, Bayvac Media Maker Fellowship, Firelight Media Documentary Lab, and Camden TFI Labs. The In-Between is her first feature film. Next, I would like to introduce Maisie Crow, whose film premiered last night at Sundance. Maisie Crow is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and photojournalist based in Marfa, Texas. She is the editor-in-chief of the Big Bend Sentinel and Presidio International newspapers in far west Texas near the US-Mexico border. In 2018, her documentary, Jackson, received a News and Documentary Emmy Award for Outstanding Social Issue Documentary. The film had its world premiere on Showtime and won 15 Film Festival Awards for Best Documentary and Audience Favorite. And I would also like to introduce now Alejandra Aragon from Ciudad Juarez. She's a multidisciplinary artist whose work explores the identities of border regions and how territories determine one's experience. Her documentary film, Invisible Nights, was part of the Coordenadas program of the Ambulante Film Festival in 2018. In 2019, she was awarded the Mexican Fine Arts Grant and a film production grant from the Tribeca Film Institute If Then program. She was a member of the 2020 Jupe Stewart Masterclass of World Press Photo and recently received the Border Narrative Change Grant from NALAC. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to get right to it. I feel like we have a lot to cover, and I also want to remind the audience that you can definitely submit your questions, and we will be getting to them around the 50-minute mark of our panel. So let me just get started with my first question. So it was really cool. Everyone on this panel sent me samples of their work. And there was a similar theme that I saw to everybody's film, which was that all of the films were had a focus on youth from the border region. So I wanted to ask you all a little bit more about that. The films that you are currently working on or just completed, At the Ready by Maisie Crow, The In-Between by Robie Flores, Disrupted Borders by Alejandra Aragon, and Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, directed by Aitch Alberto and set to begin production sometime this year, focus on youth who are born and or are living on the border. What connected you to these stories and inspired you to choose to tell them? If anybody wants to jump in, otherwise I'm going to call on you.
Yeah, I think that my biggest motivation is to find stories that shift us from our identity, where it's like we're shifting the perspective of what we're known to be and moving it beyond that, whether it be like my transness or my Latinxness. Like it informs my perspective, but it isn't my whole identity. And I think it's time for stories like that to be told. And I think when you're handling youth, it's a perfect foil to kind of explore all of those themes.
Absolutely. Who else wants to talk about that?
I think sort of the same for me. Talking about the youth at the border, it's trying to look at the future, right? But also trying to interconnect their past it's a way to reflect on the region, on where we come from and where are we going to, right? And I think in my case for Disrupted Borders, Shelley and Wendy's story are two stories where intersections of all sorts of issues regarding the border interconnect. So it was a great story to talk about the border and other possibilities of life in the border.
Love that. Macy, you want to go next?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. My film At the Ready explores the criminal justice program at Horizon High School, which is near El Paso, Texas. And for me, when I came home to Texas, I really wanted to look at how the national rhetoric was impacting some of the younger voices in the border region, in particular, the students that were part of this program, and is a program that was, pretty surprising to me the first time that I saw it. And I felt like there were so many complexities in there that through the eyes of these students, I think opened up a lot for me and hopefully for audiences as well.
I had a similar motivation as Maisie. I was working in New York at a newsroom and during the 2016 election, and I was working on a tech travel show, but like next to the news editors and like the constant rhetoric was about how just like crazy dangerous and the border is, and that we have to like build a wall and all this stuff. And I was like, this is crazy. Like I grew up there. Like, did I imagine my experience? Did I make that up? And so I wanted to come back home and just revisit just what I lived, and just to show, I guess mostly for myself, to just be like what was this real, and just kind of how the national rhetoric was affecting home. And it was funny because it was like business as usual. The week I got home was like the week that the community was celebrating Friendship Week, which I know that happens like along a lot of the borders, where they do the abrazo ceremony and they meet in the middle and they like do a big hug it out ceremony. And it's just like, and I wanted to explore how, like these experiences that we had growing up here are cyclical. So in going and revisiting my past by like looking at the kids that we were filming with, presently, we got to see how, that we go through the same type of experiences, and yeah, it's really just chill life on the border, and I wanted to show that.
Absolutely.
There's another thing that I want to bring up, and it's like I noticed it in all those clips, is that all of what we showed was very sensitive and soft and compassionate, and there was like a femininity to all of it, which is not how you usually see these stories being told, and they're usually really harsh and really brutal. And I think that that's part of the goal, right? Is to softening the lens around how our stories are told.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I love that you bring that up, Aitch, because I was just in like prepping for this conversation and to like make the points that we wanted, that we usually talk about, like when we talk about it amongst ourselves. I was going through all of the towns, all of the titles for border on IMDb, like the first ones that come up, and it's all just like so ridiculous, like murder, like all of this descriptions is like murder, smuggling, trafficking, told against the backdrop of violence and stuff. And it's just like, of course these stories are real and exist. Like these happen like along any border around the world, just like crime happens like in any town, any city, anywhere. But it's just, it's like it's like it's by design that these perceptions of our communities, of our homes, of our people exist, because they've been perpetuated in these stories that continue, you know, that like in the last 4 years just like exploded into the national conversation that then had very real consequences. And we don't get the nuances of like all of our different experiences right here. You know, it's like life is just like in any other part of the world, is like it's also very slow, it's also very boring, it's also very exciting, and there's just like a lot of different things that shape us and form us. And yeah, I mean, like exactly what Aitch said, like it's exciting to see that there's like, you know, so many of us here and that we're all adding to like this like matices, what the shades of experience that we all have, that we bring. It's more than just, yeah, drugs and guns and whatever. I saw a really funny one that said they were on the border and it was like a Mexican sacrifice cult, human sacrificial cult. That was like the most diverse they got, with like from the drug cartel narrative.
And a lot of people don't know and don't live that experience, so they rely on this messaging from movies like Sicario or whatever the hell it is, and it's like they believe it because that's the only depiction of it. And so like it's our responsibility to reframe that and to like keep pushing the story forward.
Yeah,
exactly. And I've got
just to add one last thing to that conversation, because I'm from the Mexican side of the border. I'm from Ciudad Juarez. And if there's a stigma, it's in Ciudad Juarez, you know. But I do believe that shift in perspective, when we talk about that particularly, I don't believe that it is just to, I go back to what Aitch Alberto just said. Women's perspective, it's different because we talk about things through the experience of our body. So we approach themes and subjects with a sensibility that it's very different. And I think even the hard things and the struggles that the border faces, because it is a geopolitical turmoil, it's a geopolitical strategic place where things are going to constantly happen. I think the point is to how we talk about it, instead of not talking about it or just denying that we do have very hard struggles that governments have to assess, right? So I do believe in denouncing what happens because I do that in my work, but I also believe in talking about it from another perspective. And I think adding complexity to the issues is what makes us understand them better, and not just keep them in a, I don't know, that just what you described about Sicario and all of these ridiculous things, you know. But yeah, that's my take on that subject.
Absolutely. I love everything that you all have said. And, you know, one question that I have to follow up with that, and we'll get into all of these topics in a little bit more detail in a sec with other questions, but just as a follow-up to what all of you are saying, I know that distribution plays an extremely important role in what stories make it out into the mainstream and what doesn't. So what role do you think distributors have, and how do you think that we can push past that so that the dominant narratives aren't violence, aren't, you know, a lot of these other brutal depictions of our border?
The industry doesn't see brown people's stories as bankable. And it's an industry and a business run on fear. And if there hasn't been anything that proves it's successful, they're gonna back away from it. Even though we're like Hispanics, Latino are one of the biggest movie-going populations, we still don't have stories for us. And even with like Aristotle and Dante, which is like a super successful IP and book with fans all over the world, there was still, I mean, I've been 4 years in trying to get this movie made. There was such a resistance to it because of its queerness, because of its brownness, all of that, right? And it's taken having to like assemble an army of like Latinx mafia to like get it greenlit and have people believe in it, because you're adding elements to make it bankable, right? Which adds a lot of pressure, but it's like a fight that I'm willing to have because I find it to be so important, especially when it's a story like this that doesn't, you know, perpetuate the narrative that we've seen.
Absolutely. And so what, if I can ask you a more personal question, through your experience, what are you determining is the best distribution strategy to be able to get these films, to get this film out more into the mainstream and to people all over the world, especially those who love this story and who've been following it now for years?
It's like, it's just so, it's so hard because it's so many steps to get there. And like the way I've always seen this film is like in a wide audience. So I haven't settled for anything but that. Like we could go out and shoot the movie in a really like indie way, like, you know, run and gun it. But I think that it deserves the same attention that other films get. And that's why I've been so stubborn in my pursuit of how this is told. I don't know what the right answer is because everybody's experience is so different. And you're going through, you need the right producer, you need to get into all these rooms. Like there's just, it's such a journey that I think if you're not in the industry or like a filmmaker, you don't fully understand. So like a lot of kids that are desperate to see this film are like, why is this taking so long? And it's like, I work on this almost every day. And like, this is such a part of my life that it's like, it's taking long, not because of me, it's because the world isn't ready.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Yes.
Before even talking about distribution at the border, there are other issues regarding production of film. In my particular experience, I mean, there's no school of film in this border. There's a minor in UTEP, I think, more focused on theory rather than production. There are issues regarding financing for making films. There are issues regarding accessing equipment and all sorts of issues regarding how the cities are not prepared to accept film production and many, many other issues, at least when you want to work within the region. And for me, the big opportunity came to understand the process of how films are distributed, where through partnering with Movie Mon Studios and Kathy Chen, who are the producers for this film on the other side of the border, that allowed me to come into this world of granting and then distribution for films that allow me into the If Then program that, by the way, disappeared last year with the pandemic as part of Tribeca, and it became part of Field of Vision. And then we later got some support from the Austin Film Society to post-produce the project. But every step of the way is a struggle to make a film even get finished. And after getting it finished, getting it distributed. Right now, if it wasn't because of the support of Field of Vision through the pitch that we went to get that grant, we wouldn't have a larger audience that the regional festivals that we can reach, and maybe some streaming in our own, I don't know, platforms such as Vimeo or maybe other, I don't know. But at this point, that has been like the ladder that you have to go through in order to even reach the conversation of distribution.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really, really important to know, and something that not many of us do on the US side. So that's extremely vital information. Thank you, Alejandra.
I also community, sorry, Angie, is really important, and like the support of other filmmakers and building that network. And I think that a lot of us haven't done that yet. And I think that we're trying to like rise above us instead of like uniting together. And there's just like, there's such an importance in us supporting each other in a real way in order to like excel the way we want to.
Yeah, I think that it's like a big, I think it's going to have to be a big grassroots effort between all of us filmmakers, especially like Frontera filmmakers, because when I started out, I was like, I just need to get as far away as possible from this place, because it's just like, I'm at a deficit from everyone else. Like, I'm like, I have to catch up. I was able to get to New York, and I grew my network, and I made incredible friends and colleagues, and I learned so much. And then, when I came back down to Eagle Pass, I was like, oh, I'm not from Eagle Pass. I'm a New Yorker now. I just like came back to like make this movie, and I was like very removed from this place. And because I just, coming from where you come from, you don't believe that you have the ability to do to do something like this because you don't have the proximity to that. Like you don't have anybody that like you can see and connect with that could tell you like, oh yeah, you do it like this and you do it like that. You know, it's you can access it. And especially because through this process, for me personally, I've had, yeah, I just saw Chelsea Hernandez. Hi, Chelsea. We need more Latinos in executive positions, and I think that's like the biggest problem, and more people of color that have nuanced experiences that would trust you as the expert of your story. I mean, for me, I know that like, I mean, we've been very lucky in funding and support. And it's an anomaly, and I'm very aware of that. And I know that it's because it was a very big conversation in these last 4 years to talk about the border, because people hear the border and they're like, okay, like they perk up a little bit. And then, you know, in the beginning, when I came back and started this film, I did have a very kind of like outsider perspective. I'd been gone from home for so long and just kind of fell into the tropes that outsiders fall into when making films about the border, of being like, where's the story, chasing like everything that I was hearing in the newsrooms where I was coming from. And that wasn't actually going on. I was trying to like impose my story onto it. And because I knew that that's what gets attention, that's what sells. And in the beginning, the way that our story was formed, it was kind of like, you know, trying to show that like, you know, like the typical things that people are used to seeing and wanting to get behind. But the moment that like I stayed here and I really started going back into my personal experience and letting like my personal story like really mesh into it, and really accepting my identity and just being like, yeah, I am fronteriza. It's fucking cool. I totally you know, embrace it. I want to learn more about it. I want everybody to super fully embrace it and be able to see themselves reflected in this film. That's when I started getting questions about, you know, well, like, is this, you know, where are the migrants, and like where, like, I just like, it doesn't feel, you know, like it feels very one-sided, or it feels just kind of like people were expecting to see just like the turmoil and like the hardships and that exists, but like it wasn't my experience. And then my experience here is a general experience, you know. It's just like, this is like the fronterizo lifestyle that we had here in Eagle Pass and Piedras Negras. And I got a lot of pushback from people when we'd be in spaces just kind of like questioning it, like, you know, well, where's the rest of it? Like, where's this feels, yeah, it didn't, people were expecting to see like families separated at the borders, and it does happen, but it's just, I just like, we shouldn't have to be like this one film shouldn't have to be responsible in telling the entire experience of the border, and we never get to see this experience. And I think it's so important for kids to be able to see themselves like elevated and celebrated and represented in their experiences, you know, just like, yeah, just be celebrated. And that's been a struggle, because people think they know what they know about the border is what the border looks like. And then when you show them what you have, it's just kind of like questioned. And like Chelsea said, if we had more, you know, Latinos in executive positions, it would be a lot easier to get these stories through. And so until that happens, I think it's just like, yeah, between all of us, it's just kind of like, doors open over here, o sea, vénganse en chinga, you know, like just kind of like push everyone in as much as we can, and like just demystify the process and like give as many resources and connect as many people. Because I, like, for me, my mission is just like, how, like, we need a ton of stories, like, to just kind of start to change this perspective of this place. And so how many more filmmakers can we get that, you know, or like little, like high school kids that are really interested, and they probably have like so many incredible ideas from being, you know, so indie down here, and I have so many things to learn from them. And I think that it's exciting to also look at like young, new, fresh voices that don't have the access to formal training, and you know, executives and people, grantors and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I wanted to, because everything that you're saying, I think is so on point, Robie. And in seeing your film yesterday, you know, it really, really resonated with me on a very strong personal level. And it was wonderful to see myself represented in that way. And so everything that you're saying, I really appreciate. I want to go on to the next question, which really is, you know, just kind of piggybacking a little bit off of everything that we've already been discussing. And so one of that is on the responsibilities, right, of us as filmmakers. And so given the past 4 years of hate-filled rhetoric about border communities, immigrants, and Mexicans, what responsibility do you feel filmmakers have, if any, when telling stories about the border?
I can go. I think one of the biggest things is like ensuring the representation and accuracy of the individual voices that we're telling and the stories that we're showing. In my recent film, I very much went at it from the perspective of the 3 individuals that I followed. And I think there were definitely people who watched the film that were angry that they didn't hear opposing voices to what the students were saying and what they were dealing with. But my main purpose in the film was really understanding what was happening for these 3 students at the time. And it was complex and it was challenging, and it was challenging for me, but I don't ever want to like force my own narrative or what I think someone's narrative should be on them. And so I really tried to honor everything that I was learning along the way. And for me, I think as a journalist, this is a very fine line to walk, but I always hold myself, like the highest standard that I hold myself up to is like, how are the people who are in this film going to feel like they were represented and viewed? And so I always watch the film with all of the main characters in it before I share it with a larger audience, and make sure that one, I've represented them in the way that they see themselves, but 2, also be able to answer any questions that they might have. And I think that's the hardest part to me about filmmaking is always adhering to that and ensuring that I'm doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is difficult because my background's in documentary as well. And I think one of the most difficult parts about that is that, even as a documentary filmmaker, you can't help it as a filmmaker bringing your own perspective and editing it from your own perspective and from your own personal experience. And so, yeah, there's a fine line between allowing the subjects to tell their own story and in the way in which you add your own perspective when the film is done, and how those 2 merge. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
And I think that's a conversation that we should have with our subjects. It's a conversation that definitely went on between me, Shelley, and Wendy for Disrupted Borders. I wanted them to feel like they were also in control of their own image, what they would, because Disrupted Borders is a documentary film. Even though that set us back a little bit in the process, because I really needed these girls to give them time to talk about what they wanted to talk, if the hard things were something that they wanted to talk about. And then it just, with time, they realized whatever they wanted to show about themselves to the world. But we must allow, sometimes that's hard when you're working, especially on a schedule or behind like a grant, but we should give that time to the people involved to understand that they do have power over that they can show themselves to me, and that I will make a very, very good, a commitment to be true to the way they want to be represented, right? And that is a conversation that I have to take then to the distributors, to the rest of the team at the time of being editing. And that was a back and forth, because especially because we don't want to perpetuate certain narratives, because we don't want to, we're talking here, Shelley, let me just give a little synopsis. when Shelley is a brilliant artist, Wendy is an engineer. Shelley is a double limb deficiency, has a double limb deficiency in her body that she has to do everything with her mouth. And we were trying to be very careful about not perpetuating an disabled, able-bodied narrative. So this was very hard. And I think we managed. I don't know, you've seen the film, Angie. My film is not showing right now, but it's still in post-production. But all those conversations had to take place in order to find those very fine lines where we can have the conversation about the issues, but at the same time, giving space for these girls to be themselves in front of the camera. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Alejandra. Your film, yeah, it was absolutely gorgeous. It was very evident and obvious that you took the time to share those stories, because it just felt very personal and empathetic, and just so I fell in love with those girls. So yeah, that definitely came across. Anybody else?
I think it's just important to not take on the full responsibility of like representing, I think Robie, you said this, of the whole, you know, Latinx experience, Mexican experience, border experience, and stay true to like what your goal is as an artist. And for me, is to move away from the two boxes of the, you know, border crossing immigrant to the exceptional immigrant, and really stay within the nuance and the beauty of what our existence is and how much we contribute.
Absolutely. I think because Robie was talking about nuances too. You know, it's spending time with the people that you are telling films about, and spending time in those communities and really immersing yourself. Or if you're from those communities, just being able to share those nuances naturally is so important. And why, especially, you know, at Femme Frontera, we advocate strongly for that. I think, Robie, I saw you unmuting, so I think you wanted to say something else.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I was just in case you were going to ask another question. But yeah, I agree with Aitch, just that our experiences, yeah, I mean, that they're nuanced, and to stay true to the story that you want to tell. And that's why we should, you know, really help fellow filmmakers or fellow storytellers get to tell their stories, so that we all then get to like add to the different shades of experiences that we all have, because we can't possibly, you know, encompass the whole story into one film. And I think this conversation about, you know, having the people that we're filming be our collaborators and our, you know, participants. We're not just like staring at them and like peering at them through, you know, like this like magnifying glass. We want their voice. They're giving us like so much of themselves to open up their space for us to be able to peer in and share that with, you know, on such a wide scale. And I personally just always feel very protective and careful of that, because I know, I mean, like I'm so shy otherwise, and I'm like I don't know how. I'm so grateful, because I couldn't possibly do what they're doing, because like, I mean, me da un chorro de pena. Like, I'm super shy. I can't, like, I'd freeze up, and just like the thought of, you know, being so open and vulnerable with people is just is kind of debilitating to me. And I'm so grateful. It's such a beautiful thing that they're allowing us to do, to be in their space and to share such intimate moments with them, and such important moments. And especially, you know, for my film that focuses on youth on the Eagle Pass Piedras Negras border, like from like early childhood into teenage years. Like these are kids, and so like I constantly want to be asking them, you know, I constantly ask them at every stage of like the production that we're in, like, are you guys okay with this? And consent is a very big deal, especially with the youth. And this film is going to take a bit more to come out, and so like it's nice to be able to like have them be a bit older and go back to them and just like still check in, like, are you okay with this? Because I I don't like to feel like I'm coming in and taking something from them and like taking it for myself and just like putting it out and doing whatever I want with it. It's like, it's theirs. It's their experience that they, you know, kind of like loaned to me. And I want to be very protective and careful with that.
It's absolutely beautiful. Yes. I have one last question for you all, because I think in about 5 minutes, we're going to turn it over to audience questions. And so I wanted to say, as important as it is to share films about issues that affect the Latinx community in negative ways, just as we were talking a little bit about it earlier, it is just as important to share stories that share our other experiences. Otherwise, these films only tell one story and further marginalize and box us into stereotypes. In speaking for Femme Frontera, we often accept films that stretch culture and challenge narratives about Latinx community, immigrants, gender roles, BIPOC, and the LGBTQ community, told by people from these communities. Can you please speak about your film's roles in challenging narratives?
I really love stretch culture. I just want to say that, so I keep that in mind.
I always say that too. It's like, my goal is to redefine culture, redefine gender. And like, going back to that responsibility, that's like the responsibility that I'm willing to take on, because I'm in control of my narrative and the narratives that I'm telling. And I think that like, as filmmakers, we need to hold that autonomy and like be really confident in that perspective and not let it waver when there's resistance from people in the industry above you, whatever it is. And I also want to mention that I think there's a lack of representation, because generationally, like, our parents, our families, our grandparents came here with a labor mentality where the arts and creativity wasn't an option. But us are now, you know, creating that path. And I think we'll start seeing that, because I'm starting to see it. You see that there is like a lot of, I have a team of agents and managers, and it was very important for me to find the very few Latinx people, because there's such a shorthand and it's so important. And I see that it's starting to happen. So yeah, it's exciting. And I think that that's where we're all are. And that's the responsibility we hold in the stories that we're telling, but we're doing it.
So proud of you, Aitch, by the way. I'm so proud of everyone. Yeah, who else wants to talk about this? Go ahead.
I can. I think one thing I was really surprised after the election to the response of the way the border region voted, and to people being so surprised to have people in the border region vote for Trump. And to me, that really pointed to a lack of understanding of just how diverse communities in the border are, just like anywhere else in the US. Yeah. And for me, I think that there is such a need to fully understand every culture in the country. And, you know, for me, living out in West Texas, really understanding how there can be, like, you know, in my film, there's conversations in a classroom where students are debating the border wall, the migrant caravan, and it surprises people who have never been on the border that there would be some students that might be pro the border wall or like scared of a migrant caravan. And I think that for us to all move past that and have a more fruitful conversation as a country, we need to understand where these perspectives are coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Alejandra?
And I think, well, my experience is a bit different because I am not actually living in the US. I do live in Mexico, but my experiences has been in both sides of the border. Most of my family is in the United States. I studied high school, a part of high school in the United States, right? You know how that is. But I think the struggle is to have to always work within the constraints of identity politics, you know? I noticed this when we went to pitch the film to the New Orleans Film Festival. There were Black communities and Latino communities competing against each other to get some resources to make a film. So we each have to go to whatever we have within this identity politics scheme in order to access certain resources, right? But then after you play that game, sort of, then you have to come back and try to look at your own stories and through your own experience, and try to give this complexity to the stories. But I think that's the struggle, and that's something that I don't know if white audiences, I mean white filmmakers, have to really go through, to have to always have to say, I am Latino, I am Mexican American, and I have to just put all these labels on me, on my territory, on everything, so I can, at this moment in history, make sure that you understand the importance of my story, right? And then those constraints, then we have to come back and try to get out of them, right? And to make them like just Maisie said, try to make sure that we show stories from diverse people that maybe not think as everybody think a Latino community, a Mexican American community should think. And I mean, I'm sort of losing my train of thought, but I think that's a very fine line that I think I have had to learn in the last couple of years, especially through this project. And it is a form of, I don't want to call it violence, but it's a form of sort of neglect that we have to work around in order to make films. And my responsibility comes when I come back and try to convey the story as I understand it, and then make it understandable for other audiences, for wider audiences, so they can also understand the border as I am understanding it. So I don't know if I made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have anything to say last? I know that we're moving on to audience questions.
Great. This is a great conversation. I'm going to jump in. A couple of questions I think you all already touched on, but one kind of tagging on to what Alejandra was mentioning, and this is for anyone. How do you deal with the white gaze within the industry? And what are the challenges that has brought you getting your films made, and may not have to do specifically with film that you're working on right now, but in any of your experiences?
I mean, it's the white gaze exists because our stories haven't been told. So it's like, it's very like uncharted territory. Like that's the challenge of where we are. And that's why it takes a bit of balls, no pun intended, of be willing to have that fight and and go up against these people that have, it's the only story they know, and it's like almost not their fault. And it's you walk into the room with the goal to change that perspective. It's not easy, but like I'm down.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I mean, I got told in the beginning like, oh, this could just be a short, the film, and I'm like, no, this should be long enough for kids to get to like see their whole story from like childhood into high school. Like one of the biggest a really lovely reference that we have is Boyhood, and I just like love how much it just gets to be. And it's like if this kid in Austin, I mean around Texas, can get a story about like start to finish his whole childhood, and we can all accept it and like love it, and it was like totally celebrated, like why can't little kids on the border get the same thing? Mexican American kids on the border get the same thing. And it's exactly what Aitch says. We just have to like keep pushing for this representation, and that it deserves that sort of that attention and that space to be seen. And because like Aitch also said, it's like Latinx people in America are like the highest, are like the biggest like movie going population. And so like, it's like people just have to continue to especially people, you know, in places of power that can open doors, like just continue to let these stories come through, because they're going to be watched. Like that's not a question.
And also the world existed in a binary way of thinking, like it's one thing or the other because of the white gaze. But I think we're evolving, like as a culture, as a community, as a nation, whatever the hell it may be. And it's like, because of our voices, because of Black voices, you know, it's like and it's a fight. And sometimes you got to use your body. And I think that's where we're at. But I feel a sense of hope. Or it's maybe like extreme denial, but like I'm gonna stay in hope.
You would, yeah.
I think this is less a space for me to talk as a white woman, but one thing that I do want to say is that from my perspective, I think I can always be better. I think I can always work harder to include more diverse voices. One of the things that we really tried to do in El Paso, for a number of reasons, but I think most importantly, because I think it makes the film better, is we used like all local crew. And, you know, I had some incredible cinematographers working on the film, and Braulio, who first started out as a sound mixer and became a producer on the film, was constantly like my, like, not only like companion in the field, but like we would leave, and in the car we would constantly just be like talking about what we filmed and like what that meant, and the story. And so I think that, yeah, I mean, I am white, so there is going to be a white gaze from my work, and I'm always hoping to do better.
Okay.
And on that last point, yeah, I think also a very important part of making the film was to incorporate other creators, especially women, because even within the small communities of the filmmaking industry in the region, there are very few women. And in all sorts of technical, ¿cómo le llaman? Puestos técnicos. And one thing I managed to get into the film was to get a score from an original score from an artist from Ciudad Juarez, Coneja, a wonderful DJ who totally understood the technology part of the film, who totally understood the sort of cyber punk idea behind it, and she just totally understand that part of the film in order to make like a very original score that could talk to the film. And she totally understood the girl's perspective. And I mean, I think that adds up to shifting the perspective, not only from the director's perspective, also from Kathy, our executive producer, and whose idea was to start the film at first with Wendy's part of the story. She's Chinese American. She's married to a Mexican, and she has a Mexican Chinese boy, and she's totally worried about how those stories and how his boy will be affected by those narratives, you know? So I think in all levels of our production process, Ramon himself being the producer and reaching out to me on the Mexican side instead of reaching to a filmmaker in El Paso, I think that speaks about all the efforts that we are trying to make in order to make this film a very border perspective without being what, as just Aitch Alberto said, a binary thing, you know, because the border is easy to understand as a binary, North and South, Mexican and American, but it's such a complex place where people from all over the world come, and that makes it a transversal, intersectional place where identities can go all ways, all directions, you know. So to incorporate that within the production itself of the film was something very important for me as well.
That was great, Alejandra. The next question has to do with what you guys talked about in supporting each other and trying to find collaborations and partnerships to support the work going forward. So where have you all found safe places or spaces that you can collaborate with other folks? There are a couple of questions around that. Where can other people go? New folks, people who are in the same, sort of making the same kinds of films you were making. Have you found connection and collaboration in specific places and spaces?
I think Femme Frontera is a great resource for that community and collaboration. I think there's someone named Vanessa Razo who used to work at Remezcla, who's really impassioned about creating community. And on Twitter, she often posts, and on Facebook, Zooms like these for just Latinx filmmakers and creatives to kind of like get together and like their virtual mixers. That's what I could think off the top of my head. I think film festivals are also a really great resource to meet other creatives. I don't know if specifically Latinx, but that's how I met you, Angie. So yeah. Yeah, there's like Brown Girls, Doc Mafia that someone just posted about as well too.
Yeah, those I think for me it was Chicken and Egg gave me an opportunity like right when I was like so green, I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm so grateful for that because I got into their Diversity Fellows Initiative program, and it was incredible to be able to be in a space of women of color and to just be able to speak freely and to be very vulnerable in the fact that I had no idea what I was doing. It's my first film. Like me aventé into it, I just trying it out because we had this idea and I was very embraced, and they kind of, you know, just the friendships and connections I made through that just helped have like really helped along the way. But then what if people don't have access to that? What if they don't know how to do that? So like I take my email and like reach out to me. Like this is what's been really exciting for me at like my experience through this. Like anytime I meet anybody that's like, you know, especially like doing their first film, and just like in other like communities that I've been through in fellowships and everything, I don't know if anybody has any questions or needs help or connecting with anybody. I'm shameless about it. I really want to help out as much as I can. So I'm happy to share my email here with anybody that.
And Nalip is also a great.
And Nalip is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And they have tons of programs for funding and all these other things.
I just recently became part of the Brown Girls Mafia, Dogs Mafia. And I mean, it was thanks to Amada Torella, an Ecuadorian American filmmaker from the East Coast.
She's
and
great.
I met her, you know her, Aitch. I met her at the New Orleans Films Festival 2 years ago. I keep forgetting about 2020. But this world is just barely new to me because I was, I think, very enclosed within the Mexican side of the border, where we have a lot of opportunities like from government grants such as Incines. I mean, it's not so easy to get access to them. I've been trying to get some grants from them as well without any luck, because if there is machismo in an industry, it's in the Mexican film industry. It is so hard to get feminist perspective views film to get made in Mexico, and you can see it. That's why most women are doing documentary film in a very guerrilla style, going out with a pure camera doing films, you know, because making like big industry, big budget films, it is still very hard. And so yeah, I am very new, and whatever like resources you can share, that'd be great, because I'm just barely starting to get to know these communities where I can, I don't know, be part of, help in whatever my experience can help, and also get more opportunities to make films, because I'm also interested in making films from this side of the border, you know. So I'm working between, in the space in between, Robie.
I wanted to ask if everyone on this panel could also add your any links where audience members can see your work. There's a lot of questions being asked of that, so if you can just be sure to include that as well.
Yes, I was going to also add that. People are putting some resources in the chat. And then, yes, if you want to add that to the chat, but also just say, where can we see some of your work? Where should people go? Anybody want to start?
Next year, I'll have an episode of Little America that I wrote. It's shooting this summer, COVID contingent. So you could watch that. And then we're shooting Aristotle and Dante this year as well. So next year's going to be huge.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Mine's not out yet. Next year, hopefully, at some point.
Go ahead, Macy. So
No, I'm sorry. You go.
no, I just was going to say the same. Disrupted Borders is in post-production right now. We are hoping to finish it anytime soon and have to be able to get it to any festivals we can get it within the time frame of what is left of this year. But for sure we'll be out there, and we are also negotiating some streaming contracts, so hopefully we can get it in some platform also in the future, maybe next year or later. But yeah, that's what and I can just share my website where you can see more of visual arts work as well. And yeah, I'll share it in the chat.
And there's still one more opportunity to see my film at Sundance tomorrow. If you go onto the Sundance website, and then also at the Big Bend Sentinel, the local newspaper in Marfa. And I also just want to share my email too, because I'm always like happy and open to support any emerging filmmakers and answer any questions, because it's an impossibly challenging world to navigate.
Angie, what about you?
Thank you. Yeah, so our organization website is femfrontera.org, and we actually just released 5 grants today available for filmmakers in our region. So we have grants specific to El Paso, grants specific to Juarez, and then we also serve the surrounding communities. So if you do go to our website, again, femfrontera.org, you can see those opportunities there. And then, of course, in May, June, we start accepting submissions for our film festival. And so all of that information can be found on our website as well.
Great. Well, I know we're out of time, and this was such a great conversation, and we should always do this kind of conversation and have you all talk about your work, but also just the conversation evolves, right? And that's what part of this panel was about, is how to evolve these stories and how to evolve these perspectives. So I really appreciate you all for being here. And also, you know, if there are we at AFS obviously have film programs, and if you want to learn more, please go to austinfilmsociety.org, and you can see the resources that we have available and can connect you to filmmakers as well as you need it. Thank you all so much for being part of this conversation, and I appreciate your time and the work that you guys are putting in the world. And hopefully we will see you again at another Beyond Borders panel. We have, I think, one more tomorrow with the filmmakers of Jockey talking about North Texas filmmaking. And then we are co-hosting the Black Media Story Summit as a partnership with Houston Cinema Arts and Black Public Media. And that is on Tuesday. And if people are interested in wanting to learn more, please go to the website as well for that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you all.
Bye.
Bye.
I think we're good. Are we